Hello and welcome to Wizards, Warriors, and Words, a fantasy writing advice podcast. I'm Jed Herne, author of The Thunder Heist.
I am Michael R. Fletcher, author of Black Stoneheart.
I'm Dirk Ashton, author of the Paternus Trilogy.
And I'm Rob J. Hayes, author of Pawn's Gambit, which may or may not be released when this comes out.
Sorry, I'm not sure if it's the English accent, but was that Porn's Gambit?
Yeah, Pawn, as in sexy
Okay.
kind.
Yeah,
No,
cool.
Prawns. Prawns
Totally. Oh,
Gambit.
prawns.
Oh,
is a
you know
book
what
about
Pawn is,
shrimp.
Fletcher. I've seen the videos.
Porn is pretty popular at the moment with Queen's Gambit having hit the big time on Netflix. But no, that should be coming out on... Is it out on the 26th of January?
That's out on the 26th, yeah. So I've got no idea when this podcast's going to release.
This podcast will come out, I think, on the 18th. So it'll come out about 8 days from when this episode first releases.
Okay.
Yeah, very excited for that as well. So today's episode is all going to be about the Grimdark genre. So this is something that I think we're pretty well qualified to talk about, having Michael R. Fletcher in the room, who is widely regarded as a fairly grimdarkish author within the circles. Mike, do you want to kick us off by sort of describing how you define grimdark?
The hardest part of the entire thing, define
fuck.
Grimdark.
Yeah, throw me to the fire. Okay.
Easy question.
So the funny thing is I don't write grimdark. I just write dark fantasy, which everybody then calls grimdark, which I guess makes it grimdark. I don't actually know what grimdark is. So how about what I write is dark fantasy. I don't pull punches on descriptions. My goal is to put the reader in the book. I want you to see, smell, hear, taste all of the terrible shit that's going on. And I guess maybe that's what makes it grimdark. A lot of people will say like, oh, gray morality, gray characters, there's no good guys kind of stuff. But I to me, that's horse shit. There's still morality. Everyone is kind of, at least in my stuff, tends to be the good guy in their story. Everyone's trying to do what they think is right. It's just, I mean, look at the real world, right? You can have people on either side trying to do the right thing and absolutely clashing and hating each other and, throwing words like fascist or communist at people who are neither. So maybe there's a touch of realism in there as well. I don't know. So I don't know what grimdark is.
Very philosophical way to start the episode.
There are like criteria, more realistic and explanation and description of violence, gore, darker side of human personalities. Overall, people say it's overall more nihilistic. You don't have any, there are a lot more shades. Everybody falls in shades of gray. You don't have like true, really lovely good people or true, just plain evil bad people. That the stories don't end on a happy or hopeful note. But I've found that a lot of the things that I read that are classified as grimdark, including a book I won't name called Beyond Redemption by
Some guy,
an author I've never met called Michael R. Fletcher, that has a surprisingly kind of hopeful and fun ending. Joe Abercrombie subverts narrative norms in kind of how he, how he ended the there was a lot of people screamed and yelled about how he ended the First Law trilogy, right? That that really launched him. And Game of Thrones gets into all the kinds of nastiness that humans do. I mean, it might help to, Abercrombie, George R.R. Martin are kind of considered the elite of the Grimdark genre. Does that make sense?
Yep.
To you guys?
Yes, definitely.
And I mean, I never considered that I wrote in the grimdark genre, but consistently see reviews of characters saying that there are a lot of grimdark elements in my books. But overall, I wouldn't say that they are grimdark. Now, Rob is also known for doing some grimdark work. Rob?
I'm in the same boat as Fletcher. I don't think I write grimdark. I would certainly never classify any of my work specifically as grimdark.
You don't set out to write grimdark.
Well, no, I mean, I suppose
almost no one does.
Yeah.
My debut trilogy and like the whole First Earth saga is quite often considered grimdark because it's full of morally grey characters who, you know, like one of the main characters is a murderer who generally does things for himself. He's quite selfish and all that. But I never considered grimdark because I don't consider him to be, or any of those characters to be, just like evil. They're just facets of humanity, and I think for me that's kind of what grimdark is. It's a way of expressing certain aspects of humanity in ways that will contrast them to make them stand out. So, you know, like I might have one of my characters who is an utter arsehole, you know, happy to murder people, pillage, that sort of thing. But then he may have some trait which brings out the humanity in him, something like loyalty. And it might be so strong that amidst all the darkness, that trait shines through. And for me, that's kind of what I think grimdark might possibly be. It's the idea that the shining light of humanity shines brighter when surrounded by all the shit that humanity also conjures up around it.
Love that definition.
But to be honest, I don't really think grimdark exists because of this exact conversation.
Stuff that was written 30, 40 years ago is now getting sort of like relabeled grimdark, like Stormbringer, grimdark. It's like, no, it's dark fantasy. It was dark fantasy when it came out. It's still dark fantasy now.
Mhm.
It hasn't suddenly become grimdark. It hasn't changed.
Thomas Covenant. Yeah.
Thomas Covenant, not grimdark.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. The only thing, I think the best argument for grimdark I heard when trying to explain to someone that I didn't write grimdark was he said, dude, your books are grim and dark.
They often take place at night.
I was like, yeah, okay, got me.
Literal translation acquired.
Yeah.
I mean, you did write for Warhammer, right? And that is like, isn't that where the
grim
origin
darkness
of the term kind of came from? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
I
it was basically co-opted by Joe Abercrombie, who used it as a joke, basically, didn't he?
For his Twitter handle.
He is Lord Grimdark on Twitter. Yeah. I forgot to mention Mark Lawrence. He's right up there with his Prince of Thorns.
I don't think it was ever intended to be a new genre. It was just sort of taken. I think mostly by the fans, you know, the readers who wanted to have a new genre named, but nobody seems to be able to define what it actually is in any realistic sense.
And I've seen a lot of discussions on it, and it's difficult to define.
It's 10 different people what it is, and you get 10 different answers.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it serves the same purpose that all genre names serve, right? It helps people decide if this is something they want to read. If they like it, they want to look for other things that are similar. And without that label, it would be very difficult to find other books that are similar, right? So the label does serve a purpose, I think, that does help readers, and that in turn helps authors move more books and helps with, you know, you talk about brand identity. Somebody who writes a lot of books like that, people would want to go back to their books or go find that stuff. Like people, just anybody who hasn't read Mark Lawrence, which isn't that many people. Hopefully, people who like Abercrombie, George R.R. Martin, Mike's stuff, Rob's early stuff, would then go look at that, right? Simply because I've thrown it into that genre. So it is helpful. We can discount it as much as we like, but just like anything else, it's helpful, even if it's bizarre and just covers so many things, like urban fantasy. It's just, that's everything from the steamiest PNR to Jim Butcher, right? To, I mean, people call Harry Potter urban fantasies. So how truly helpful is it? It's really hard to say, but it gives people a ballpark.
I mean, yeah, it does, but I think as a genre label, I've seen Grimdark turn people off more than it seems to turn people on. You do get a lot of people who will go out and search for Grimdark, but then I see a lot of people sort of saying, when a book gets mentioned, is it Grimdark? Because
I don't
I don't want to touch it, because it
Yeah.
seems to have this sort of connotation that if it's Grimdark, it's going to be ultra violent, ultra bloody. There's going to be all sorts of things like rape and subjects that might trigger people, and so it seems to be that it's just sort of collected. Anything that might be sort of like that might trigger people, that might turn people off, gets collected into this idea of Grimdark as a way to actually turn people off books rather than on.
Yeah, it can work both ways, just like urban fantasy. I don't know how many times I've heard people say, oh, I don't read urban fantasy, I only read epic fantasy.
I don't read urban fantasy.
Yeah. You just hear it all the time.
I don't either.
Except that both of you have read urban fantasy.
I have not read urban fantasy. I don't know what you're talking about. Certainly no books called Paternus on my bookshelf.
That's epic urban fantasy.
There you go.
So you're forgiven.
Don't show it. Don't show it, Fletcher. That's the old cover. He won't like you for it.
Mike is holding up the old version of Paternus, which has a very.
I still love that cover. It doesn't portray.
It's not a bad cover.
It doesn't portray the feeling of the story well enough.
It certainly doesn't portray the grim darkness.
There's too much light.
The problem with the original cover is that it doesn't have my name on it. Whereas the re-release cover does, which makes it infinitely sexier.
Actually, I have.
You're going to re-release it without my name, aren't you?
I recently changed that, Mike. I'm sorry.
Oh,
for years it had Mike. Well, I put this little.
Wait,
I put.
Is that? Can you hear that? The sound of my little heart.
The sound of betrayal.
Fletcher, turn around. I think there's a knife in your back.
I put this.
Gangs. Oh my God.
I put that little known author M.R. Carey on the front.
I've never heard of them.
Yeah. I know.
You're not big enough. Too small.
I know.
Dirk's moved past us. He's in the big league now.
He's famous. Left us behind.
Oh, we've
Welcome to the Dirk Ashton podcast.
What were we talking about?
We are talking about grimdark fantasy, and nothing is more grim or dark than getting stabbed in the back by your author friends. But before we continue on with this, just want to pause quickly to talk about our Patreon. If you're not already aware, we now have a Patreon where for a couple of dollars a month, you can support this show. And you can also get access to some really cool bonuses like ad-free versions of the show, advanced reader copies of our books, shout outs at the start of episodes, editorial feedback, a whole bunch of other stuff like that. So if you want to check out our Patreon and support the show, you can go to patreon.com/wizardswarriorswords, all as one word. And the link to that will also be in our show notes as well. The show's not like going to go behind a paywall or anything. It's still totally free. But if you do want to help support the show and get access to some sweet, cool bonuses, that link will let you do that. So yeah, back to
Jed has production costs and he needs to cover them.
Pretty much. Although my editor is very cheap. He's a very nice guy. But yeah, that would go a long way towards helping us with the show because we've done this for almost half a year, I think.
Really?
Yeah, I think so.
Seriously, it seems so much longer. Oh my God.
Feels like a lifetime to you. Yeah, you probably had hair when we started, Mike. And now it's
What? I have hair again. Well, I kind of have hair again. Some of it
depends
came
on the
back.
angle you're viewing it from.
Yeah.
Anyway, Grimdark. I think the point we're touching on here is that, like, with all
Aging
genre
is
labels,
grimdark.
It's the
So when you
essence
can
of
like do a
grimdark.
comb over with your eyebrows and your nose hair and you're growing back hair and you're all good, you're like, nothing's grimmer or darker. Fuck off.
that is very true. That is very true.
It's true. I mean, if you're going to describe nose hair, then that's pretty grim.
And Mike does love describing like lots of weird bodily functions and stuff in his books, which are classified as grimdark.
I did it
so-
once. One book, totally typecast.
You are the snot king.
I am the Snot King. One book. Once. Damn it.
Once was enough. Once was too much. But anyway, I think the key point that we're touching on here with grimdark stuff is that, yes, it's a totally arbitrary label that we probably don't think about that much in the writing side of things. But where I do think it is useful, and what we have mentioned, is when it comes to the marketing side of things. Because like with all genre descriptions, none of us probably really set out with a specific genre in mind a lot of the time, right? Like, Dirk, you know, people describe your book as urban fantasy. Other people say it's epic fantasy. Other people say it's grimdark, whatever. Like, you just sort of write the book that you want to write. And then to some extent, you know, defining the genre is almost this activity that comes after the initial inspiration. And I think what we're mentioning is like, it's useful to the extent that you can use it to sort of figure out who to appeal to when you're trying to do your marketing and everything like that. But I also think it is useful as well, like just sort of when it comes to the overall tone of your book and everything. And yeah, like knowing that you're sort of perhaps like, you may not start off with a book that you want to become a grimdark book, but then it sort of like evolves to become that throughout the writing process. I think that's certainly something I've noticed where I've like haven't intentionally set out to write a grimdark book or anything, but then it sort of necessitates that you go there because you're like, oh, well, I sort of have to show this level of violence or this thing that's happening to the character. Otherwise it feels like it's a bit of a cop out and stuff. So I was wondering, like, what do you find the most appealing about this sort of having like all those caveats about the fact that the genre doesn't really exist? What do you find most appealing about this non-existent genre?
I like to be challenged when I read, and you know, and I'm a firm believer that everyone needs to, you know, be offended on a regular basis, in order to, you know, really kind of define yourself, and constantly trying to redefine or define myself, I guess. So, I mean, some just vicious or terrible situations make me think. They wake me up. If everything is just kind of happy all the way through, I love that too. But if I do enjoy some gritty stuff, and that includes, you know, movies, books, um, and and it's, you know, it's different from most of the fantasy I grew up reading. So I I enjoy it, and well, you know, there are different types of enjoyment, right? Roller coasters are fun, but are they really fun? You know, they scare the shit out of you, and that's why we like them, you know. So I think that's what draws a lot of people. It's not because they're dark, terrible people and want to read more of how they believe the world is, and you know, just soak, you know, in that stuff, steep in it. The majority of readers of Grimdark, that's not the reason, I don't think.
Yeah, it's sort of like exposing you to fear so that then you like have the experience of going through those terrors, but you kind of know that it's like maybe not necessarily going to be all right at the end, but it's like not the same thing as in real life, but it sort of does prepare you for if that was to come up in real life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a chance to, Dirk's right, like challenge people. So I never set out to write grimdark. But I don't want my books to be safe. I think safe is boring. I would like at least once per book to manage to sort of like jolt a reader out of their sort of comfort zone. Hopefully more on a philosophical level rather than that's disgusting kind of level, because I don't really give a shit about shock value. I don't write for that. I don't care about that. But my goal, what I really want is at least once per book, more would be nice, but once per book is to make a reader sort of stop and go, why do I believe that? Why do I feel like that? Like, why is that wrong? And if I can show someone the other side and twist something a little bit, then I feel like I've done my job. So as Anna Smith Spark said, like our job is not to be safe. Our job is to show the dark side.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, the thing that I like about the genre as it is the lack of plot armor that you tend to get in more grimdark titles. I think a lot of the more safe fantasy you read, the hero's not going to die. You tend to know that in grimdark as well. Let's be fair. If there's one main point of view character, they're probably going to survive. But you get a feel of who is going to survive and who isn't. Whereas in grimdark, you tend to have that sense of anyone can die at any moment. This character you form an attachment to, they are in peril at all times.
Ned Stark.
Exactly. And it provides an extra sort of level of tension within the book, because you can literally fear for this character who you've formed an attachment to. Whereas I think a lot of fantasy, you don't tend to fear.
Well, that's the later books have gone off into journeying around Lord knows what the hell's really going on. But I read the first Game of Thrones book way before the TV show ever came out. And being an epic fantasy reader, I was completely shocked, had to put the book down and think, what the fuck? When Ned Stark had his head chopped off at the end of book one. And I was like,
with the Red Wedding for me, both those times.
Well, yeah, it's just, after that first one, then it was what you were talking about. I feared for all the other characters that I liked, right? And I knew that even characters that I like to dislike or dislike to like, I just knew that any of them could go at any time. So that's what kept me going through a lot of it. Part of what kept me going through a lot of it. Yeah.
Through all those feast scenes.
Yeah.
I think what you're touching on here is certainly what appeals to me about the genre as well, is like when you prove to readers that you're committed to like showing the full depths of the human psyche, whether that is, the acts of violence that humans can commit, or like on the opposite spectrum, like acts of kindness they can do as well, but more towards that like darker side of it, which is what Grimdark really revels in, is like it proves to readers that, yeah, the stakes are actually genuinely high in this. And with the higher stakes of knowing that any of your favorite characters could have horrible things done to them, not just death, but like, tons of other things which are way worse, like them being forced to betray people they really care about, or changing something really deeply embedded about their personality. That like just makes me as a reader, and probably the same for you guys as well, be so much more emotionally involved in the story, because you're like aware of that it could really go in any direction, and it's not just corralled into this sort of like safe, lane that probably more traditional like epic fantasy stories are in. So yeah, I definitely think that
it gives the opportunity for characters to change in a much greater way, right? Either way, from like truly reprehensible to not so much, or good people just end up doing some truly horrible things. It's a wide range. Now, I have to say that I have no problem with people who don't want to read that kind of thing, who really just want to escape and have fun and find joy in their reading. I don't have any problem with that at all.
I mean, they should still buy my books, but then they should
but
just
don't read
don't
it.
read them.
Buy them. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
They'll have higher resale value that way if you never open the pages. So look at it.
Absolutely. Keep them in cellophane wrapping and just like.
I will never read this because it's terrible.
I can't remember the last time I received a book that was in cellophane wrapping.
No, I can't either.
Actually, no,
I can. I bought John Gwynn's series, Faithful and the Fallen. For some reason, all 4 books came in like cellophane wrapping.
Oh, I do get them in cellophane if I buy a box set that has the slipcover.
I didn't have a slipcover. I just bought all 4 books as one.
Yeah.
I assumed I was going to like them, and I did.
Yeah, there you go. Well, on that grimdark note of disposable plastic packaging being used unnecessarily, perhaps we should wrap up this episode so that we can squeeze in another one.
I see what you did there. That was good. I liked it.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Rob. Thank you so much for listening. Oh, also let us know like what you as a reader enjoy about the grimdark genre, if you happen to like it, or if you don't like it,
or if you have questions.
Yeah, or if you have questions, send them in. Hit us up on Twitter or email wizardswarriorswords@gmail.com and let us know, because we love hearing your feedback. That is all for this episode. Thank you so much for listening or watching, and we will see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Wizards, Warriors, and Words. If you enjoyed this, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel so that we can keep growing this and keep sharing our writing advice with more authors. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you next time.